Okay, so I think this whole making sense business is a hoax. We become satisfied when parts of the world that did not make sense start to make sense to us. Like we have a theory for it, when, whatever, okay. There's like, when humankind was like at a more primitive stage, maybe many more things did not make sense to us. And now, as time goes on, using science and technology, we are being able to understand more and more things. And so more and more things make sense. And one of the objectives of doing science and technology is because it feels good when something makes sense.
I'm not sure if I say that's 100% the case.
Okay. Well, I feel like we can at least say that it feels good when things make sense.
Maybe it feels good in certain cases, but I don't know if that's the motivation.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so I'm just saying that we can agree that it feels good for things to make sense, right? And I think that that's where the hoax is, because we feel like, okay, so here's my question. What is making sense? Like, what does it mean when something makes sense? I feel like we have not thought deeply enough about what is quote unquote making sense, and does making sense quote unquote make sense? Like, do we understand what understanding is? Understanding is a kind of interaction between the human mind and the universe. It's an interaction of a certain sort where it starts to become more parallel to each other or whatever. I don't know. And that feels good. And we have not seriously investigated that, because what we have done is we have built a big like cathedral of knowledge using this making sense process. Like in science, we now have a big body of knowledge, and we're like, this is how things are because this is what makes sense. But what is making sense? That's just part of the algorithm that the universe runs on us. And maybe it could have been different. Like, maybe making nonsense could have felt better.
You know what I think making sense is?
Yeah.
I think it's just human beings trying to make a pattern out of everything. They observe the pattern, and they're trying to see, okay, does this fit into the pattern that I've been observing? If it fits the pattern, then it makes sense.
Yeah.
And if it's not making sense.
Yeah.
I think that's science in general.
But what, did we come up with that? Or is that we come pre-programmed with this algorithm that wants to detect patterns?
I don't think that's something unique to human. Turkeys can make sense too. Turkeys can observe the patterns and say, okay, during the past few days, I've noticed that nobody has came from the slaughterhouse, so none of us is gonna get killed.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, but this is something that we arrive with. We don't decide whether or not, okay, no human decides that, no, I'm going to feel better if I do not pattern complete. And there's no point in our life where we make the choice whether we opt into this algorithm or not.
I think we don't get to make that choice.
Yeah, exactly. So we had no choice but to run this algorithm that detects what we call patterns and tries to fill them in. And then we sit on our egos and say, we made this thing, it's called science, but we didn't make it. We are like clockwork toys that are acting out according to our emotional strings of what feels good, what doesn't feel good. My advisor said, when things make sense, there's a dopamine hit, and we are, as scientists, are seeking a dopamine hit. So we're just like puppets. So then what is making sense? What does it mean for anything to make sense?
I think science is just a collection of egos.
Of what?
Egos.
Egos. Okay. How so?
A lot of the times is what we're observing what had happened, trying to make a pattern out of it, trying to replicate the event based on the patterns we've observed, right?
Yeah.
But the patterns can be non-existent, or it could be not as what we've observed, or there could be out of pattern things happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Chance. So when science say, okay, we found this based on the observations or experiments that we've run, and this is like the knowledge we have right now, a lot of times it's more or less just satisfying the ego of human being, because we can say, okay, now we know how things work or what certain things are, but those knowledge are very fragile. They're only made based on existing phenomena. Yeah. And they could change at any time.
And only existing phenomena as far back as our memory goes.
Yeah.
And there is this story, or there's this hypothetical question, how do you know that you did not spawn here 2 seconds ago with your entire life story memory implanted in your mind? Then you would think that the universe is kind of, it's all of this stuff. You would say, yeah, this existence is, for me, 33 years old. But what if the universe just started?
I mean, that's possible.
Yeah, so in that same sense, I was saying that's just something implanted in your mind, right? And right now, we have this picture where, there's science and the universe is so many billion years old. Why can't it just be a packet of data and code just implanted in our mind? These are just different ways that I'm trying to talk about it, because earlier I was saying that making sense is just like a little packet of algorithm that runs in your head. So how can we trust its results? Meaning that if you wanted beings to arrive at a different understanding of their reality, you would just put a different algorithm in their mind. Like something maybe that does not look for patterns, something that looks for something else. I don't know. And you don't know what kind of reality that those people would deduce, but they would be happy with it because their mind is looking for that and gives them dopamine hits and sense of stability or security, whatever it is. And so that's going to be their science and their universe. So how do we know that this is it? I don't think we can know that it's...
I don't think we can know.
And it could in fact be changing. Like think about this weird thing. Right now we have some body of understanding of the laws of nature. What if those laws of nature are continuously transmorphing over time, so that observable changes start to become apparent in like 10,000 years? And maybe human memory doesn't go back as far to keep tracking how the universe used to. It's just...
I think that's very well possible. I don't think we can trust the knowledge or the findings.
Yeah.
And in ancient Chinese stories or legends, there was a story about a guy from a specific tribe. He's very powerful. He's huge. He's like an Amazonian, but in China. And one day, there is a big drought, and a lot of people in his tribe died because of the drought. And because of that, he started becoming really interested in sun. In a sense, he's like, it's the sun that kills all my fellow, people in the tribe, and I need to catch the sun. So then he comes up with this initiative of chasing the sun as a person, where he'd just be running and running and running across mountains and rivers, forests and oceans, hoping to capture the sun. But the sun is always there, just kind of like far away from him, and always changing positions and changing locations. And because of that, it seems like it's never possible for him to get even close to the sun, because it's ever-changing and everlasting. So he just died along the way. As, for his lifetime, he's been chasing something that changes constantly. And couldn't make it. And that, to me, is just scientists.
Oh my god, so harsh.
But isn't that the truth?
Hey, I'm gonna say it's a little bit better than that, because that warrior or whoever he was, he did that whole thing with an energy of like frustration and anger.
Yeah. The place where they come from is a little bit different.
I feel like as a scientist myself, like this shit is fun. And even if it doesn't ultimately make sense, the
process is fun.
This like game of making sense that's making sense in the moment is fun.
Yeah.
And if it stopped being fun, I would not be able to do it for much longer, even if things made sense.
Yeah. I think the place where they come from is different, but the end result is more or less similar. Or the objective.
The end result? Yeah. The end result is that you die.
Unless you stop doing it at some point.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, I don't want to chase the sun anymore. And I don't know, go back and grow some plants. Eat some rice. And then plant some more rice.
Dude, I think any kind of pursuit, human pursuit, not just the pursuit of making sense, but everything else is unfulfillable.
Well, it
like
depends.
Even hunger is unfulfillable, because you're like, okay, you feel hungry and then you eat, and for some time it goes away and then it returns again. Like
I think for some materialistic desires, there is an end to it.
What's the end?
Well, a lot of people have goals when it comes to those, right? You say, okay, if I save up to this amount, then I don't really need money anymore.
Yeah.
So there's an end to those kind of goals or desires. But if your desire is to feel satisfied or feel full or feel a certain emotions like internally, there's no end to that.
Yeah, I think the different means by which you seek to fulfill yourself can keep changing. But yeah, the bottom line is that it's not possible for us to like permanently fulfill it somehow, unless you get enlightened, which is something else. But I guess then that means that this desire for things to make sense also disappears upon enlightenment.
I haven't been enlightened yet, so I can't say anything to that.
But I can say for myself that I feel like the desire for things to make sense has relaxed considerably.
Okay.
For myself.
That's good.
I'm trying to become like more okay with like just leaning into life, even if it does not make sense.
As it should be.
I guess. But I do think that there are a lot of people, including myself in the past, whose sense of security in life depends very strongly on a foundation of things making sense.
Oh, then they get destroyed very quickly.
Yeah, so, but I don't know. Some people, I guess, manage to guide their lives into whatever groove makes most sense, you know, or gives them the feeling.
I think eventually there's going to be something happens that they'd be like, there's no way I can find this making sense.
Yeah, I mean, death is the final.
Yeah, you know. For anyone, there's going to be something like that. It might not be death.
Yeah.
For some people, it might be other stuff. It could be a disease. It could be cancer. It could be their loved ones killing themselves.
Yeah.
It could be anything. But there's always going to be something during the journey where you're like, there's no way I can find this making sense. And some people just go to religion and hoping that they're gonna make sense, the religions. But I think that's more or less a self-deceiving illusion.
Or I have an alternative proposal. I feel like some religious feeling overlaps with this feeling where things don't need to make sense. Like, I actually feel within myself some overlap between like spirituality, or what you might call like faith, and the what I was talking about earlier about how I feel like things don't need to make sense. Like, I feel like I trust without.
The end result might be the same for religions and what you described, what you've gone through, but the process is very different.
I wonder.
I think the process is very different, and I consider the religious way the easy way out.
Yeah, but I feel like sometimes it can happen backwards. That a person started having certain internal realizations, and then they began to get drawn to spirituality or some religion.
Spirituality, yes, I understand. I wouldn't be able to understand so much if someone is like facing some internal conflicts and got drawn to Christianity and then turned out to be like, Jesus, I want to hang out with you.
Do you think your life makes sense?
Probably not.
Probably?
Like 99% not.
So are you not worried?
What?
Are you not worried that your life does not make sense?
Sometimes I feel a little bit anxious about it, but I'm not worried.
Do you think it's all going to make sense in the end?
I don't know. It's possible it won't.
Would you like for all of this to make sense?
What?
Would you like for all of this to make sense at the end?
That might be nice. That might be nice.
And what would that mean, for all of this to make sense? What does that mean?
That means I can rest in peace with everything I've experienced.
What if I give you that rest in peace without giving you any answers to what's going on and why is it going on?
That's probably going to be pretty nice too.
So do you actually need things to make sense? Hello, I'm not here. This is Neil, but I'm not really here. This is just the inside
of your mind.
You are having an anxious dream in which you are trying to reach me, but if you still feel like logic and numbers and categorical stuff works in this dream, then you can leave your name and number.
And maybe something will happen.